You're watching the Urban Debate in Magicbricks Now. 3 weeks into demonetisation, and the Parliament amended the Income Tax Act. Now, there are a lot of questions about the new rules and how they affect you and me as average middle-class salaried taxpayers. I want to take you through what we're talking about. Now, this is if you voluntarily disclose your cash. A tax of 30% with a surcharge of 33% and a penalty of 10% that totally adds up to 50% of what you declare, which means that if you've put in a certain amount into the bank, 50% of that will go in tax. If you do not declare that amount, for non-disclosure post the 30th of December, there's the tax, the same surcharge, and the penalty, and of course, a very, very heavy penalty that finally adds up to about 77%. So what we're going to try and figure out in the next half an hour is how much of this you should be concerned about. What does the government mean when they say voluntary disclosure? What does the government mean when they say those people who have not disclosed? How will they figure out the difference between the two? And to help me answer those questions, Shailesh Haribhakti, the chairman at DH Consultants, and Samir Kanabar, partner tax at EY, join me in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. There's a fair amount of nervousness. Mr. Haribhakti, I'll start with you first. From an average Indian, because, and I'll give it to you in examples so that people at home understand what we're talking about. We're getting questions from people who've written in saying, as a housewife, I've saved money, which is, let me be honest, all housewives' right to save money out of the family budget in cash in their homes to come in handy in case of emergencies. Now, that money needs to be deposited in a bank with someone who doesn't have a current income. What does that mean? Will that be construed as black money? How do you explain that money? Mr. Haribhakti.
I don't think there's any cause for nervousness. First of all, we need to realize that we need to have a track of what we are doing. If our income stream is well documented, and if there is a fair and reasonable amount that is saved by the housewife in your example, and that accumulates over a period of years, and you have a documentation of what has been done, the missing piece is the documentation. You will need to get that done. If, in your example, this housewife has over 10 years, based on the income of the family, saved an X amount, and is now saying that this is from tax paid past savings, that this money has been kept aside for a rainy day, and if she has documentation, then nobody can really be brutal enough to say that this is an amount on which 85% tax needs to be paid.
So what you're saying is, what I have to do, if I'm the housewife we're talking about, I can prove to the IT department that this is what my husband's earnings have been over the last, this is what the family income has been over the last number of years, and these are the withdrawals that have happened from the bank accounts, which have come home for expenses, and I've saved a certain amount of that, which is added up. So that's the explanation that I will have to give. So will the IT department scrutinize each and every account and ask for explanations? Will we have to volunteer those explanations? How will that work?
So a lot of voluntarism will start having play here. Where you can explain. Now, you could have withdrawn your monthly withdrawals of, say, 1 lakh the day before demonetization happened. And you go on the next day and honestly redeposit
Put it back in, yes.
Very fair explanation. You have a documentation of the fact, nobody can question that. Now let us take a case where you genuinely have not paid tax on a certain amount of money, and that is piled up with you, and you go and deposit. Then what the Amendment Act now permits you to do is to voluntarily make the payment of tax, make the payment of the cess, and make the payment of the penalty, and deposit 25% tax-free for 4 years in the scheme that is being notified along with this act.
All right, let's put a pin in the 25% deposit for 4 years. That's a separate conversation that we have to get to. Samir, I want to bring you in here. Now, the financial year is not over. So if let's assume in the second example that Mr. Haribhakti gave us, where I have money that I have not paid tax on, that I've made through some other source, and I've now gone and deposited it. I could very well say that I've earned this money by doing some sort of freelance work, and since the tax year is not done, I can declare it. I have up till March to declare this money. So how do we prove that this is money that I have not paid tax on?
Yeah, so again, I think what Shailesh bhai mentioned is again equally applicable in this case, because you have enough documentation and source to disclose that from where you have earned this income. Now, once you have been able to establish that there is a source of income, and obviously you had time to file your return, and then you file your return and pay normal tax, nobody is going to
Some
question
sort of
it.
invoices of the work that has been done, of the
Yes.
payment that has been
Yes.
received. Okay.
Yes. So you'll have to keep documentation of source, which is very critical. And once you establish that source, I don't think anybody is going to question. But very important is that will 10,000 be questioned, whether 10 lakhs will be questioned or 10 crores will be questioned, is a question mark.
We don't know.
But I think government is going to be smart enough to do ABC analysis, and obviously the catch here is to go behind the people who are actually engaged in black marketing or black money.
But it's fair advice to give everybody right now is to make sure your documentation is in place. In case that comes up at all, just it makes sense to spend the weekend just filing all your documentation, making sure that you have justifiable documentation for for all of the money that you have right now. I also want to ask you now, let's get to, there's a 2.5 lakh rupee allowance on the deposit that was given to us by the government in the first 2 weeks of demonetization. Now, let's assume, and I'll put the example up on the screen, I want to understand if someone puts in 10 lakh rupees in their bank account, Mr. Haribhakti, will, like we normally do in tax, the first 2 lakh rupees be, 2.5 lakh rupees be exempt and the rest of it will start getting counted? Or does that not apply for this voluntary disclosure?
Nothing applies.
Okay.
This 2.5 lakhs goes back to zero.
Okay.
And if you have 10 lakhs, let us say portion of it is past savings which you have documented and you have accounted for. Portion of that is current year, fresh sourced, documented income. That will bear tax as per normal rate. Balance will have to be offered as voluntary deposit, full amount. And on that, you will be obligated to pay 50% tax, broken down at 30% rate, 33%.
Effectively, half of it will go away.
Half of it will go away.
Yes.
Plus, a quarter of that will have to be impounded in a tax-free deposit for 4 years.
Right. And it's very important to note here that the quarter, the 25% that we're talking about that gets put in, a Pradhan Mantri scheme, it's called the PMGKY, will pay you zero interest and you can't take it out for 4 years. But this 25% gets calculated on the total amount that is being disclosed.
As voluntary.
Not post-tax.
No,
Not
of the total amount.
Of the total amount.
Total amount.
All right. So, Samir, tell me this. A lot of people have deposited a lot of money right now into their accounts. Is all of that money going to be considered income disclosed? And I know that you've just answered this question. I want just to reiterate it because there are a lot of people who are very concerned right now that, hey, the government asked us to put our money back into our accounts. We did. Now you're going to say you're going to take half of it away. So just so people can understand right now the difference between someone just putting money back into their accounts and what the government means by voluntary disclosure. And then we'll get to the second category after that. Samir?
Yeah. So again, you have to put 3 iterations. First, whatever money you have deposited, if you are able to establish a source for it, remove that amount and then see what is undisclosed. But again, on that important point of 2.5 lakhs, and as Shailesh bhai rightly mentioned, that there is no 2.5 lakh shield available as announced by Revenue Secretary on day 2. But there has to be a reconciliation, because once government goes on record to say that there is a shield available for 2.5 lakhs, and then you remove that shield under the scheme, you are actually giving mistrust or losing the faith. So I'm sure that a reconciliation would happen, and probably up to 2.5 lakhs, there has to be an allowance given, because even under the normal laws, up to 2.5 lakhs, you are not taxable. Assuming that if that shield is available, then obviously you would want to reduce that shield of 2.5 lakhs and then want to go ahead and pay the tax.
And then make all of your calculations. Do you believe that's a possibility, Mr. Haribhakti, that the government will allow us the 2.5 lakhs?
The way I look at it is that the instruction that will go out is that where the visible deposit is 2.5 lakhs, don't question it. That is what I feel will happen through administrative instructions.
Correct.
The law has been drafted, and I have carefully considered this before I answered the question. There is no provision of 2.5 lakh exemption under the Amendment Act at all. It doesn't mention it. So therefore, I would not take any chances. I would do my documentation, I would do my savings count, I would do my voluntary disclosure, I would pay the taxes, I would go legit.
Yeah.
And if I choose not to, then we'll wait for your next question.
So that was my question. So the other category of tax is for those who do not disclose their money post the 30th of December. So Mr. Haribhakti, this obviously, I mean, is every thief's analogy, right? If I get caught, so it depends on, I've not declared, I've chosen not to declare because I don't want to part with the 75% of the money that I have right now. Half of it in tax and the other half in that bond scheme. I've held on to it. I have now been raided and I have been caught with money I cannot explain. Then what happens?
You pay 60% tax. On that, there is a 25% surcharge, which takes you up to 75%. And there is an additional 10% penalty, which is applicable to both these categories of under this new Amendment Act. So you go up to 85%. So what you will then be allowed to keep back is only 15%, provided they don't make the case that this is relating to past years and it is undisclosed income and you need to pay penalty on it, which can go
and interest
even
and all
much
of those
higher,
things,
interest
yes.
and penalty. Then
You lose all the
God save you. You might have to cough up more than what has been discovered. So therefore, this is truly a signal to India. Come clean.
So tell me something, just so our audience who's not familiar with the tax laws understand. Before this amendment, how did the laws stand? If I was someone who got raided by the income tax department and they caught me with a certain amount of cash or a certain amount of possessions that I could not explain, how would the law normally take its course?
So the assessment would be done of what was the income which had escaped assessment, on which the taxes would be levied. The interest would be levied for the late payment and penalty would be levied, which was in a range that depended on the discretion of the assessing officer and depended on the manner in which the non-disclosure or the hiding was done, so to speak. So those were all the factors that were operating before. And in many cases, we have seen that the entire assets that were captured
Get seized.
So that was the position before. But there was a kind of a laxity in this whole process. So
Does this take away discretion from the hands of the officers who do the raids and write up the reports?
With this Amendment Act, the whole idea seems to be to remove discretion so that you don't have situations where there is an arbitrage which is possible in the whole process of assessment and of getting the right tax paid. That seems to be the clear direction the government is moving in. And I think we will see many more changes in this direction on 1st February.
You know, Samir, this is since demonetization was announced, and let's be honest, we've had a lot of various announcements coming in from various departments of the government. There's also a parallel pipeline of unverified information doing the rounds, a lot of times on WhatsApp, that causes a certain amount of nervousness among people that the government is now going to seal and look through everybody's lockers, that there's some sort of special, data crunching, big data study that's being done on all of our money. And there was one that was thankfully proven wrong, that the 2,000 rupee note hides a chip that can tell you where it's going. But how much of this, and a lot of it causes panic, what is your advice to average citizens? Where should they get their information from as far as the tax department is concerned? What sort of clarification should they be looking for?
So I think you're right. There is a lot of rumors and there is a lot of scary things going on in the market. There's someone talking about e-property card, etc. There are two ways to look at it. If you look at sequence of events, the way things have been happening, we had Black Money Act, we had income disclosure scheme, and now we have demonetization. Can one say this is an end to it?
Certainly.
At least I believe that this is not an end to it. Maybe there is still more yet to come. If there is not enough disclosure made, why this had to come? Had income disclosure scheme been successful or black money scheme would have been successful, probably we would have not ventured into this. But because those schemes were not successful or people voluntarily did not come forward to this, the government has come to this stage. And even if here there is not enough success, then it is possible that government still may go further steps down where such rumors may prove to be true. But to answer your question, that where should one look for information?
Out of curiosity, when you say, I'll ask you that question again, but out of curiosity, when you say government may take further steps, what do you mean by further steps?
Yeah, so again, the government will start, what we are hearing is, they may start saying that, okay, now how much cash expenditure you can do. So if you are going to a shop to buy something, there will be a cap. They'll say, okay, you cannot pay more than 5,000 in cash, as an example. It may be whatever limit. Beyond that, it has to be digital or electronic form. How much cash you can keep at home. And if you keep more than that, it will be confiscated. It doesn't belong to you. So these are the kind of things, and these are, of course, these are thoughts. These are just thoughts. We don't know what government is thinking, nobody knows. And obviously it will not come out in open because these are all secret measures which government is monitoring, and it may take in duration as things progress.
Right, Mr. Haribhakti, there's also no mention right now in the amendment of any sort of criminal procedure on someone who voluntarily discloses. It doesn't say that it gives you any immunity from further criminal prosecution, that you won't be further scrutinized by the IT department, that the rest of your stuff will not be looked through. So explain to us that. So for someone who decides to voluntarily disclose, does that then get them off the hook, putting it simply?
It's like this. The expectation of the government is that everybody will come completely clean. That is not only the expectation, but should be the way the law should operate.
Yes.
That's the way the law operates everywhere in the world where efficient tax systems are there for discovery. What do we have on the ground? We have a tax information network, which is extremely powerful. It was established in 2006. So we now have 10-year data on people's reported transactions and their returns and the underlying details that the returns that we submitted with the returns. So that can be subjected to big data analytics, which is what is the next step that will happen to discover there being any chances of escapement of income, which gets represented in terms of either assets, which you can't explain, or in terms of consumption that you can't explain. Now, if that happens, then the wrath of the law will be even more severe, which is the signal that we are finding.
Yes.
What is there to fear if you have kept your documentation, you have paid your taxes, you have voluntarily disclosed whatever you had not done in the past?
I'll tell you what the fear is. The fear is that I will now be put on the radar of the income tax department. And for every year after that, I will be needlessly scrutinized. And you know how nobody wants to be on the radar of the income tax department.
So whether you like it or not, the income tax department does not operate in isolation. It's a part of a whole government machinery. The moment your transaction is digital, as Samir mentioned, that if you go to shop and you make a digital payment, then that gets recorded and the big data analytics piece will catch it. So what is being said now is that you are in a transparent official world. What is the next step that the government is doing? Bringing in GST. I hope and wish and pray that it actually happens.
Actually, that was a question I am going to ask you, which is that, so the system has been dealt a bit of a jolt and there's an adjustment period. We were just talking about it before the show began and you said the adjustment period could be January, could take up to February, in which case we're looking at, starting it possibly would take us till the end of the financial year to actually adjust to the new normal, as the finance minister calls it. So in that scenario, will GST then be a second jolt to the system? Do we have the luxury to deal another sort of blow to the system?
Everybody is prepared.
Okay.
For the first time, I've noticed that corporate India has risen to the occasion.
Actually, my concern is more with the traders, with the smaller businesses who have to adjust.
They've all been put to notice. We have 48 GST Suvidha providers already registered. We have a GST network which gives us perhaps a global best practice in terms of tax determination.
So you're confident that GST will happen on the 1st of April?
It can happen.
It can happen.
Only thing that can derail it is politics.
Okay. But politics has largely stepped out of the way of GST from
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
They still
In fact,
have a
yesterday
chance.
there was a statement,
Yes.
I mean, from Mr. Mitra that 1st April doesn't seem to be an achievable date. And obviously, with a lot of hue and cry coming from that sector, since he's the chairman, there are serious doubts that now how government or how GST will move. But obviously, there is dedicated move, and luckily, the act has been passed, the constitution amendment has been passed. It is only now the bill which has to get passed, and hopefully by 1st July, if not 1st April, things should be on roll.
Okay, I have. While this is not direct taxes per se, I must ask you about what's being called Benami property. There's a lot being said about Benami property. There was quietly, some rules passed before, anybody really noticed that something like that had happened. Just for our viewers to understand, and we do have an avid viewership of people who are interested in real estate. What does the Benami Property Act mean, Mr. Haribhakti?
Very simple.
Yes.
Every person owning property, purported to be owning property, will have to go and get it re-registered
Okay.
in the window that has been
Even
given.
if it is already registered.
Even if it is
and
already
the papers
registered,
are already in place.
no further stamp duty. There is no levy of additional stamp duty, thankfully. But you
Local
got to go and
authorities will
get
be
it
disappointed.
re-registered.
Okay.
And properties which are not so re-registered
Will be termed
will
Benami.
be taken over.
Taken over.
Yeah.
Taken over in totality.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's Benami. Nobody owns it. Nobody is claiming ownership to it. So those who have indulged in Benami holdings of property will be shown up for what they are.
And the argument here is, Samir, that if I've so just to explain to my viewers what it means is, if I have through income generated from sources that are not entirely legal, I have money that I have hidden in various pieces of property and written them in other people's names and not mine, so that the income tax department can't trace it back to me. Each of these people will have to go re-register and reiterate that they are owners of this property. Now, what is the argument that stops these 10 different people from doing my bidding all over again?
So honestly, again, if people have to go and register, and if people don't go and register, then as Shailesh bhai mentioned, the property will be taken back. So there are only two options available to you. Either you go and sort of put the property in the right name.
In the hand of the person who you've given it to has been.
Correct.
But my question is, if I had registered it in my name to begin with the first time around, what stops me from doing it the second time?
Do it. Then property is yours.
Yours.
Right.
The fellow who paid the money doesn't have the property.
And has no
Which is
claim
good.
against you.
No
So-
claim.
Okay. So people right now, I mean, and I'm going to now, as we enter the final phase of the show, ask you very, very simple questions, simplistic almost, that I hope you'll answer for me, either of you, whoever wants to answer. Someone who there was this thing doing the rounds of, you will have to have a e-property passbook on which all of your properties need to be entered. If it's not, if you don't have that, then you no longer have ownership of your property. Is this valid, verified information or no?
There's no
There's no
that
such.
there is no law to this effect.
Correct.
But this is like a e-wallet or a e
It's a great
locker.
idea, but
a
it's not an
e-locker.
official idea.
It's not an official
It's not an
idea.
official idea.
It is available. Microsoft gives you an e-locker in which you can put away whatever you want to put away in the e-locker. Whatever is e, you can put away in that locker.
Yeah.
All right. So that e-passbook that you've read about on WhatsApp is not verified. It's not true. There's no such announcement that has come from any government in the NCR or the central government as of what we know right now. As long as you have all of the paperwork for your property, all you will have to do, unpleasant as it might be, visit the local registrar's office one more time and re-register your property. Don't carry any cash when you do that. My next question to you is, if I have unofficially lent someone money, a family member, let's say a sister-in-law or a brother-in-law who needed money for something, who is now going to give it back to me, best to be done completely on net
Check.
banking transfer or
Check.
check so that there's a trail.
Yeah, there has to be a trail. So long as there's a trail, it's fine.
Okay, next question is housewives. Do housewives have anything to worry about? Because one of the things that I was most concerned about is we got so many phone calls from housewives who've been saving money, which is completely their right to do so, who suddenly felt that they had to first come clean to the rest of their family, saying this is how much money.
First disclose.
First disclose. Sort of reluctant, voluntary manner, saying this is how much money we have, then deposited in their accounts. And I know that a lot of them are feeling nervous about that money. Mr. Haribhakti, is there anything to worry about?
None whatsoever. If you can prove that it is purely from tax-paid savings, there's nothing to worry about. It's your money. All that you're doing is you're changing to valid legal tender. That's all you're doing.
Also, Samir, there are a lot of women in India who are not formally working. They bake cakes, they stitch clothes, they run informal, creches, tuitions, that sort of thing. There's a lot of that money, that's cash money. Do they have anything to worry about?
So again, I mean, the answer is yes and no both, because so long as you are earning income and so long as you are able to demonstrate the source of the income and demonstrate that such income...
How do I demonstrate the source of a tuition class?
Yeah, so
take a selfie with the child who's coming.
No, you can actually get it documented by way of letter, and you can issue receipts to the children to whom you are, or students to whom you are teaching. And those receipts are official receipts, right? And they are countersigned by the students or parents of the teacher. But again, important thing is that if you are unable to establish the source, or even if you are able to establish the source, but your income earning capacity is so high that you would have otherwise paid tax which you never paid, that is going to be a question mark.
If you're making more than the allotted 2.5 lakh rupees a year, and you're now sort of talking about it, that's going to be a question mark? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or maybe now under this scheme, as again we were discussing, there is no 2.5 lakhs officially. We hope it comes, but even if it doesn't come, then obviously that 2.5 lakh shield is otherwise not available to you. You had that shield available under the income disclosure scheme, where you had to pay 45% tax and come clean. Whoever would have done, it's fine, but who didn't do, will have now to go under the current scheme in that case.
All right. Mr. Haribhakti, there is a large group of senior citizens who, again, receive money from their family members in cash. They deal largely in cash because that's what they're comfortable with. And against all of the other arguments, and we've had people call us saying that I can't see the card because I'm old. I can't go to the bank, which is why I deal with cash. My son gives me cash, and that's what I use to run my house. Do they have anything to worry about at all with all of the changes that have come up?
I think they have to go through a little bit of re-education and a little bit of awareness creation that you need to drop this fear. There is no difference in the citing of a note and the citing of a dial on a phone in which you have to punch 4 numbers. That's all you need to do.
Right.
Today I asked my friend who is in Orissa, in remote part, as to how the farmers are reacting to this whole idea. He says they have no problem with numbers. They are very comfortable punching 4 numbers. No problem. The minute you ask them to put in their name in alphabet and all of that, that creates the need for more education. So long as you can base it on 4-digit PIN code,
there will be no problem.
And again, for senior citizens, so long as they do not have income earning capacity and they are getting supported by their children or whoever, I don't think there's any reason to worry, because that is not a source of income. It is somebody who is meeting their expenses, right? So from that perspective, I don't think that is going to be a challenge. But if there is a source of income, then obviously one has to think about it, that yes, there is a source of income to a senior citizen in whatever form and shape that was never paid, offered to tax, or even assume that it was never taxable, you did not worry, because they have higher limits. So long as their income is within those higher limits, okay, that's fine.
Yes. Okay, so my next question is about NRIs. We've got a lot of questions coming in from NRIs as well, who are saying, I have a certain amount of cash, there's money in my, that I'm now depositing in my NRE deposit account in the branch of whatever is available to me. We've incidentally, and I'm just asking because this has come up a couple of times, we've incidentally got questions from people who said, I had cash locked up in a cupboard in Calcutta. I'm currently in London. What happens in those cases?
No, nothing.
As long as you can
Reserve
explain
Bank
it.
of India window is open till 31st March. Even after 31st March, we don't know what extensions will be given for people who have these very, very odd kind of situations which they face. So I don't think they need to fear. They don't need to make a trip back to India instantaneously to do this. But by 31st March, they better pack their bags and come back to deposit their
Depends on
legitimate
what's in the cupboard vis-a-vis what the flight will cost you.
Absolutely.
Also,
if it's
what
worth
is
it, yes.
important that if they want to go under the scheme, and of course today there is no mention as to the window where the scheme is open or closed. So if window gets closed, as at least today the rumors are that on 31st December the rumor window will close. So even if they come later, they will not have the scheme available, because under the scheme you have to pay the entire 50% tax, you have to deposit 25% investment, and then only you can make a disclosure under the scheme. So otherwise you can't go under the scheme.
All right. So my last question to the both of you is, obviously there are a lot of salaried people who have tax deducted at source, who file their taxes, they have their Form 16s. They've never actually physically come in contact with the income tax department or any of its officers, because the system now has become rather simple. You barely have to see your own CA anymore. You just mail everything to him. So my question is, for those people who suddenly are afraid of the fact that we will now come under scrutiny, do they have anything to worry about, Mr. Haribhakti?
None whatsoever.
So if they've deposited something,
the terms
nothing,
of trade have moved in favor of people who have tax deducted at source. Let us put it that way. You don't have any explanation to do.
Yeah.
You have one job, you're getting salary. You know, there's such a small component of India which is in this fantastic position. The ratio of people getting this regular wage to those who are self-employed and entrepreneurial is 2:13. It's an odd ratio, but that's the ratio.
But in fact, government or income tax department has started issuing, silver, gold, platinum cards to all these salary taxpayers.
Yes.
So it is actually a matter of pride.
Right.
It is a moment that they have to celebrate and rise to this occasion that now at least they are responsible and they are...
This is Mr. Haribhakti, a conversation we had on day one, on the 9th of November at 10:30. On the first day, we said this is a massive point of vindication for those people who pay tax deducted at source out of your salaries. Because up until now, you were crumbling under the weight of this entire country that was on the shoulders of the salaried class. That weight will now hopefully get evenly distributed, at least in intent, with the rest of the country from what the government intends to do. And of course, execution of this entire thing and the manner in which the execution is. And I'm really glad to hear that the income tax officers are not going to be given any discretion on, who they question, because a lot of this is my ability to be able to justify the money, which is again subjective on a case-to-case basis. I might choose to believe you, I might choose not to believe you. So do you believe that now that sort of case-to-case explanation will open us up a little bit to discretion to the income tax officers?
I think people have to take this mental call, which says that thus far I have done whatever I did. Tomorrow is a new day. I need to go and place whatever I have not disclosed so far as a deposit, pay my taxes, make sure that I'm clean. Nobody can question me then.
Absolutely. All right, we've run out of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with us and answering these questions. Phone numbers on your screen, so is my Twitter handle and our email ID. If you have questions, I'll ask both of these gentlemen to come back into the studio and answer your questions for you. But remember, as long as you have the justifications on paper and you get all of your paperwork together, you should and you do not have anything to worry about. And if you're still worried, well, that's what we are here for. Feel free to get in touch and we'll be glad to help. Thanks for watching.
You can watch live TV on our website mpnow.in. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Magicbricks Now. And don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magicbricks Now. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/Magicbricks Now.